The sun was just beginning to peek over the horizon at Naval Air Station, casting long, gold-tinged shadows across the runway. Stepped out of her sleek, black sedan, the hum of early morning jets filling the air. She adjusted her uniform, smoothing the crisp lines of her navy blues, her boots clicking softly against the concrete. She carried herself with the calm precision of someone who had learned long ago that hesitation could be deadly. In a hangar full of the bustling noise of mechanics, pilots, and techs preparing for their pre-flight checks, she walked quietly, almost invisible, yet commanding attention without saying a word. A few heads turned as she passed, some nodding respectfully, others curious about the new technician with the calm demeanor and sharp eyes. Her presence was understated, but had learned that in military life, subtlety often carried more weight than bravado. Today, however, she was not here to make introductions. She had a job to do. The squadron's systems had been acting up for weeks, and she had been called in to oversee the diagnostics before the commander himself arrived to review the tech reports. Commander Briggs entered the hangar a few minutes later, tall and imposing, his polished boots echoing against the concrete floor. He was known for his strict standards and sharp tongue, a man who had earned respect the hard way. New personnel often felt the weight of his gaze, and today would be no exception. He noticed immediately, not for her skill, though he wouldn't know it yet, but for the small lightning bolt tattoo peeking just behind her right ear. It was delicate, almost hidden, a single streak etched in black ink. His first reaction was amusement. "Nice ink, kid," he said with a smirk, walking up to her. "What did you get lost in a comic book?" The chuckle in his voice carried over the hangar, drawing a few glances from the nearby techs. Didn't react. She merely tilted her head slightly, letting the morning light highlight the tattoo without a word. She had heard this kind of joke before, and she knew it was best to wait, let the humor wash over and fade. She had no intention of explaining herself to someone who couldn't possibly understand. But Commander Briggs wasn't used to being ignored. He leaned closer, squinting at the tattoo. "Come on, tell me. Flash, lightning bolt, something dramatic, right? Not exactly the image I expected from a tech like you." He laughed, expecting a flustered response or a nervous giggle. Calm's stare met his, cool and unyielding. Her eyes, a piercing shade of gray, seemed to look right through him, as if she had already seen every challenge he could throw her way and had survived them all. The laughter faded awkwardly as he realized she wasn't going to play along. The techs nearby shifted uncomfortably, sensing the tension. Didn't raise her voice. She didn't roll her eyes or scoff. She simply continued her work, opening her laptop and running a series of diagnostics, her fingers moving with the confidence of someone who knew her craft intimately. The screens flickered with streams of code, and she navigated through the system errors faster than anyone else could have imagined. Briggs, still staring at the tattoo, felt a twinge of unease. There was something familiar about it. Not just the design, a lightning bolt, but the way it was inked, precise and meaningful. He couldn't place it, not yet. Yet deep down, a whisper of recognition crawled up his spine. He had seen that symbol somewhere in a place that was supposed to be classified, a place buried under years of top-secret missions he had signed off on during his intelligence days. He pushed the thought aside, convincing himself it was nothing. After all, it was just a tattoo. But didn't just have a tattoo. That small mark was a call sign, a symbol of a reputation she had earned in operations that were erased from public record. Operations where she had hacked enemy communications mid-battle, rerouted convoys under fire, and saved entire units from ambushes, all while remaining unnoticed by the world at large. Few people in the military even knew the name Flashpoint, and fewer still could recognize it. Those who did usually treated it with awe or fear. To most, she was just another quiet technician. Briggs, oblivious to all this, returned to his clipboard, muttering notes under his breath. But he kept glancing at her, a flicker of doubt forming in the back of his mind. How could someone so seemingly ordinary move through the systems with such ease? He watched her fingers fly over the keyboard, recalibrating sensors and updating flight logs. The code on her screen was dense, complex, and executed flawlessly. She wasn't just competent, she was extraordinary. Yet she did it without flair, without fanfare, without announcing herself. The tension in the hangar shifted. The other techs began to watch her, some with envy, some with curiosity. Whispered comments floated through the room. Who is she? Has anyone seen her in the field before? Remained unfazed. She had learned to operate in silence, letting her work speak for her. The tattoo behind her ear, though, drew attention from those with knowledge, a silent emblem of a story too explosive to be shared casually. Briggs finally approached her again, leaning over the laptop as she input the last commands. Well, kid, I have to admit I didn't expect you to handle this so cleanly. His voice was cautious now, lacking the earlier amusement. Glanced at him briefly, then returned to her work. Experience matters, she said simply, nothing more. Her tone carried authority without arrogance. A subtle challenge lingered in the air. He couldn't command respect here, not yet. By the time the first jets roared down the runway, ready for pre-flight, had finished her checks. Everything was green, systems stable. The squadron was ready. Briggs, still struggling to reconcile his first impressions with the reality of her competence, took a step back. There was something about this quiet technician, something beyond the tattoo, beyond the call sign, beyond the calm exterior. He couldn't see it yet, but a storm of history, skill, and secrets was wrapped up in the woman standing before him. Packed her laptop into her case and gave a slight nod to the other techs before leaving the hangar. To them, she was efficient, quiet, maybe even unassuming. But to Commander Briggs, she had left an impression that refused to fade. A single lightning bolt tattoo, a calm stare, and a presence that hinted at untold stories. The mission briefing would come later. For now, the quiet of the early morning and the hum of jets masked the first ripple of what was to come. The moment when a commander would laugh, and then freeze, had always understood the price of silence. Behind the calm, precise exterior that everyone at now observed lay years of experience few could imagine. 2 years earlier, she had been part of a joint special operations task force operating in one of the most hostile regions overseas, a place where every second counted and every decision could mean life or death. There, she had earned the call sign Flashpoint, a name that carried respect and fear in equal measure. It was not a name earned in drills or simulated exercises. It was forged in fire, under circumstances so perilous that even mentioning them publicly could compromise lives. The origin of the call sign came from her unique ability to react instantly under chaos. During a critical mission, a small Marine unit had been ambushed in a mountainous region controlled by hostile forces. Communication lines were cut, GPS signals jammed. Enemy fire rained down from hidden vantage points, and the trapped soldiers were running out of time. Stationed in a mobile operations unit several miles away, intercepted the comms interference. While others hesitated, she hacked the enemy network, rerouted the squad's movements, and coordinated air support, all from a laptop in a dimly lit command post. Her actions saved dozens of lives and prevented the ambush from turning into a massacre. That mission alone could have cemented her legend, but military protocol and classification orders erased every trace. After the mission that would define her, this unit was disbanded quietly. The world outside would never know that a single technician had turned the tide of battle. Flashpoint existed only in whispered conversations among those who had witnessed her brilliance firsthand. Her name, her call sign, and the tattoo that symbolized it, an elegant lightning bolt etched behind her ear, were all reminders of the responsibility she carried and the secrecy she maintained. Sharing her story publicly could compromise allies, reveal tactics, and jeopardize missions. Silence wasn't just a personal choice, it was survival. Despite her secrecy, her reputation had followed her quietly through military channels. Some senior officers recognized the tattoo instantly and gave her a respectful nod. Others, like Commander Briggs, initially underestimated her. She had seen it countless times, seasoned officers making assumptions based on appearances, only to realize later that the quietest person in the room was the most dangerous, the most capable. She had grown accustomed to the invisible line between underestimation and fear, learning to wield her skills with precision and discretion. in her civilian guise maintained the calm, unassuming demeanor that had kept her off most radars. She worked efficiently, speaking only when necessary, letting her actions speak louder than words. But every keystroke, every system calibration she performed carried echoes of the missions, the careful logic, the rapid decision-making, the ability to anticipate problems before they manifested. To an untrained eye, it was precision. To those who understood, it was brilliance tempered by experience. Yet even as settled into her new routine, memories of haunted her. She remembered the heat of the sun on the mountains, the sound of gunfire cutting through the valley, the tension in her fingers as she manipulated networks from afar. She remembered the moment a young Marine whispered her call sign over a secured line flashpoint, and the entire operation depended on her. That single word had been her identity in that battlefield, a signal of hope and reliability. And though classified now, that name had stuck, etched into her life as indelibly as the tattoo behind her ear. The tattoo itself was more than a mark, it was a reminder. Lightning represented speed, precision, and decisiveness. The initials beneath it, known only to a handful of trusted comrades, symbolized the mission that had defined her. It was a story she would never tell, a history that would remain classified, but it reminded her constantly of who she had been and who she had to remain. Carried it lightly, almost invisibly, but it carried a weight far beyond what anyone could imagine. Life was different, but the shadows of her past never truly left. When she moved through the hangar, overseeing diagnostics or coordinating flight checks, she saw threats not just in the present systems but instinctively in the potential vulnerabilities around her. It was a habit formed when hesitation could have cost lives. Even something as routine as a jet's communication system, failure could trigger her instincts, and she moved with that knowledge quietly, efficiently, as if every small action mattered infinitely. Her colleagues noticed her speed, her precision, but they did not understand it. They saw the calm technician who never raised her voice, who kept her hair perfectly tied, who made seemingly mundane work look effortless. But behind every keystroke, every command, every was a mind that had saved lives under extreme pressure, a mind trained to anticipate, calculate, and execute flawlessly. For the difference between a combat zone was minimal in terms of the mindset she carried. Mistakes were unacceptable, timing was critical, and preparation was everything. The irony was that her quiet, unassuming demeanor was precisely why she had survived. Flashpoint was a legend precisely because no one outside her unit saw her coming. Her skill in staying invisible until it was necessary to act had saved lives more than once. That invisibility carried forward too, where Commander Briggs's first reaction, a laugh at a tattoo, would soon be revealed as a gross miscalculation. He didn't know yet that the quiet technician he assumed was inexperienced, was a woman whose actions had rewritten classified missions, and whose name carried weight few could even whisper. As the morning progressed, continued her rounds, checking systems, ensuring logs were updated, monitoring communications. She moved seamlessly among pilots, techs, and officers, the lightning bolt tattoo behind her ear hidden but always present, a silent testament to her past. She didn't look for recognition. She didn't seek admiration. Her job was simple: ensure the squadron was ready, maintain safety, and uphold precision. But beneath that simplicity lay a storm of experience, a legacy of skill and bravery that had earned her the call sign Flashpoint. Even as she worked, she felt a subtle awareness in the hangar, the way Commander Briggs kept glancing at her, the slight tension in the air. She knew he didn't understand yet, and that was fine. Part of her mission here was observation, patience, and quiet influence. She didn't need to correct assumptions immediately. Let the commander underestimate her. Let the squadron see only a calm, capable tech. In time, they would understand, and when they did, it would be undeniable. In that early morning light, walked among the hum of jets and the clatter of hangar tools, a figure almost ordinary yet charged with extraordinary experience. Behind the unassuming calm lay a history of fire, precision, and decisive action. The tattoo behind her ear was no longer just ink. It was a symbol of a hidden legend, a quiet storm ready to reveal itself when the moment demanded. Commander Briggs had laughed. He would freeze soon enough. And when that moment came, he would realize that Flashpoint had never really been just a legend of the past. It was here, now, and unstoppable. The morning sun climbed higher over Naval Air Station, casting sharp shadows across the concrete and steel of the sprawling hangar. Inside, the air was thick with the metallic tang of fuel and the faint hum of engines running through pre-flight checks. Pilots hustled past, shouting coordinates, confirming equipment and double-checking every gauge, while technicians between jets, carrying toolkits and laptops. Amid the organized chaos, moved with deliberate calm, her boots making almost no sound against the floor, her hands steady as she navigated her laptop through a series of diagnostic programs. Commander Briggs, clipboard in hand, had already begun his rounds, moving between pilots and technicians with brisk efficiency. But his attention kept drifting back to her. He tried to suppress it. After all, she was just another technician, right? Quiet, competent maybe, but hardly someone to command notice. Yet every time he glanced her way, she seemed to anticipate a problem before it arose. A series of warning indicators appeared on one jet's diagnostic panel, flickering sporadically across the display. Before anyone else could react, was there, typing quickly, scanning data, her fingers moving with practiced precision. Within moments, the system stabilized. The pilots nearby muttered among themselves. "How did she fix that so fast?" one asked. Another nodded, watching her with a mixture of awe and confusion. Didn't smile or respond. She simply moved on to the next machine as if the earlier incident had been routine. Briggs watched, clipboard frozen mid-scribble. There was something unsettling about her efficiency. The speed, the calm, the absolute confidence. It was more than competence. It was experience born of extreme circumstances, of situations that demanded immediate action under life-or-death pressure. Briggs shook his head subtly, trying to convince himself it was luck or practice. But every movement she made reinforced the sense that he was witnessing someone operating far above the ordinary. His mind flicked to the lightning bolt tattoo again, the small symbol behind her ear he had laughed at yesterday. What had seemed like a casual, insignificant mark now felt ominous. There was purpose there, history there, and perhaps a warning he hadn't yet understood. He leaned closer, observing her work silently, noting how her eyes scanned the screen, how her hands moved with fluid precision over the keyboard. The tension in the hangar was subtle but palpable. Other technicians were beginning to notice Briggs's distraction, whispering quietly among themselves. His quiet efficiency drew attention, her calm presence contrasting sharply with the flurry of activity around her. There was no arrogance in her movements, no desire to assert dominance. Yet she radiated a quiet authority that made those around her pause, even if only subconsciously. She didn't need to announce her skill. It was evident in every action. Then came a moment that shifted everything. A visiting pilot, a tall man with a sharp jaw and a mischievous smile, walked past and glanced at its tattoo. "Hey, Flash," he called casually, unaware that Briggs was standing just a few feet away. The nickname hung in the air, casual, innocent, but to Briggs it hit like a lightning strike. He froze, his eyes widening. Flash, that call sign. He had heard it before, in a file buried deep within a classified mission report. A name associated with operations so sensitive that even his own access had been limited. He stared at her, suddenly unsure of what he had been mocking the day before. Glanced briefly at the pilot, her expression neutral. She didn't acknowledge the nickname, didn't correct it. It was a habit she had perfected over years of working under the radar. She let others underestimate her. She let them speak freely, unaware of the depth of her experience. Flashpoint wasn't a name she flaunted. It was a name she carried quietly, like a blade she didn't need to until the moment demanded it. And today, the moment had not yet arrived. Briggs's mind raced. Could it really be her? The Flashpoint from the classified files, the woman whose skill and bravery had been instrumental in saving an entire battalion during. The memory clawed at the edges of his consciousness. Reports he had seen once, missions he had signed off on, lives saved by a technician no one outside the inner circle knew existed. He had laughed at her tattoo yesterday, thought it was a casual, meaningless mark. Now, every glance he stole toward her made him question his own judgment. Continued her rounds, unaware, or perhaps fully aware of the effect she was having. She moved between the jets, her fingers dancing over the screens, checking systems, running simulations. Every task she completed was executed flawlessly, each step revealing her deep understanding of avionics and electronic warfare. To anyone else, it would seem like skill honed through practice and study. But those who had faced real combat would recognize something else: instinct. The intuition born from life-or-death scenarios, the ability to see patterns and anticipate failures before they even occurred. A minor crisis struck mid-morning. A jet's communications panel flickered, static filling the headsets of the pilot inside. Panic rippled outward. Briggs stepped forward, ready to intervene, but was already there. Her hands moved swiftly across the controls, her eyes scanning the lines of code and system alerts with almost preternatural speed. Within moments, the comm stabilized. The pilot's voice returned, calm and steady, and the threat was neutralized before it had a chance to escalate. Briggs exhaled slowly, his earlier skepticism dissolving into awe and a creeping sense of apprehension. The squadron watched, stunned, had done in seconds what would have taken multiple technicians and a senior officer coordinating frantic efforts. Briggs realized something crucial: this wasn't luck. This wasn't a lucky guess or a fluke. She was operating from experience so deep, so refined, that it bordered on instinct. An instinct of this caliber wasn't common. It wasn't something one could fake. It was the hallmark of someone who had survived missions no one else would even attempt. As the morning wore on, continued to impress quietly. Each systems check, each jet she calibrated, reinforced the growing tension in the hangar. The pilots whispered, the technicians stared, and Briggs struggled to reconcile the calm, composed woman in front of him with the legend he remembered from classified files. The nickname Flashpoint lingered in his mind, unsettling him. That call sign wasn't just history, it was a warning. A signal that this quiet, unassuming technician was capable of feats far beyond the ordinary, far beyond what anyone in the hangar could yet comprehend. By the time the first scheduled flight lifted off the runway, Briggs felt a shift in perception he hadn't anticipated. The laughter, the casual underestimation, the jokes about a tattoo, they were gone, replaced with a growing awareness that he had been confronted with something far greater than he had ever imagined. And for her part, continued as she always did, calm, precise, and unassuming, her lightning bolt tattoo hidden but ever present, a silent testament to the power, skill, and experience she carried. The day's work would continue, systems would be checked, and jets would launch without incident. But for Briggs, the realization lingered. The quiet technician he had mocked was not just talented, she was legendary. Flashpoint had arrived at, and the storm behind the calm exterior was only just beginning to ripple outward. That evening, after the hum of the hangar had died down and the last jets had been secured in their hangars, Commander Briggs returned to his office. The day had left him unsettled. He replayed every interaction within his mind. The calm precision, the uncanny foresight, the lightning bolt tattoo behind her ear, and most disturbingly, the call sign whispered by the visiting pilot, Flash. The name clung to him like a phantom, nagging at the edges of his memory. He could no longer dismiss her as just another quiet technician. Something about her was deeply familiar, and it was driving him to uncover the truth. Briggs pulled up his secure terminal, fingers hesitating for a fraction of a second before typing in credentials that only someone with high-level clearance could access. He knew the files he was searching for were restricted, hidden behind layers of encryption designed to erase memory even from those authorized. Yet curiosity, combined with a growing respect and unease, compelled him. Years of intelligence work had taught him to trust instincts, and his instincts screamed that the quiet technician was no ordinary service member. After navigating several secure layers and inputting authentication codes, A familiar archive came into view: Operation. Briggs's pulse quickened. The name had long been etched in his memory as a mission classified above almost all else. A mission in which a select joint task force had been sent into hostile territory to intercept enemy communications, rescue trapped Allied forces, and neutralize threats that conventional operations couldn't touch. Few records existed outside the highest command, and even fewer personnel were authorized to view them. And now, sitting before him, was a file that directly connected to the mysterious technician who had just walked through his hangar. He hesitated, knowing that reading the file could change everything he thought he knew. But the curiosity gnawed at him, sharper than fear. Opening the report, he was confronted with photographs, operation logs, encrypted communication records, and the unmistakable name, Flashpoint. His eyes widened. The woman whose tattoo he had mocked, whose calm demeanor had unnerved him all day, was the very same operative whose name had been whispered in high-security circles with a mix of reverence and caution. Every anecdote, every mission detail made his pulse quicken. The report detailed her extraordinary feats. She had been stationed in a forward operations hub during a critical mission that could have cost dozens of Marine lives. The enemy had established sophisticated jamming signals, cutting off communication, and setting up ambushes in a mountainous region. All standard protocols failed, but known as Flashpoint had bypassed the enemy network in real time, rerouted critical communications, and guided trapped soldiers to safety. Her actions were decisive, executed under conditions that would have overwhelmed any conventional officer or technician. She had saved lives, changed the course of battle, and yet had vanished from public record. Briggs's mind raced. Every flash of her fingers on the keyboards earlier, every calm directive she had given during the diagnostic checks, suddenly made sense. What he had witnessed in the hangar was no ordinary skill. It was the exact brilliance, the instinctive precision, and the rapid-fire problem-solving that the file described. The woman before him was not a technician by ordinary standards. She was a battlefield legend, operating quietly, invisibly, with decades of experience compressed into her calm exterior. He scrolled further, reading the mission logs with growing awe. During one sequence, Flashpoint had intercepted enemy comms while under direct mortar fire, rerouted Allied forces, and coordinated air support to prevent catastrophic casualties. The reports were meticulous, almost clinical in their recounting of events, but they could not capture the intensity of the moments, the split-second decisions, or the lives saved because of her instincts. Briggs realized he had underestimated her on a scale that bordered on arrogance. Every note, every line, every photograph he reviewed served as a painful reminder of his earlier mistake. He had laughed at her tattoo. He had assumed she was inexperienced. And now he knew the truth. He had mocked someone whose skills had saved entire units, someone whose judgment under pressure had been proven time and time again in life-or-death scenarios. The realization was humbling, terrifying even, because it underscored how easily perception could mislead. He leaned back in his chair, rubbing his temples. He could still see her in his mind's eye, moving through the hangar with quiet authority, stabilizing failing systems before anyone else had even realized there was a problem. The call sign, Flashpoint, no longer felt like a nickname. It was a legacy, and that legacy was embodied in the technician he had just been reviewing in classified documents. For a man accustomed to being in control, the knowledge that someone he had dismissed could operate at this level of competence was both awe-inspiring and disquieting. As the night deepened, he began to reflect on the implications. His past meant more than just extraordinary skill. She had faced extreme danger, learned to operate in secrecy, and survived. She had done what most could not even imagine under circumstances no one could safely replicate. And she was here in his squadron, operating quietly, almost invisibly, yet already influencing outcomes simply by her presence. Commander Briggs felt the first flicker of fear, not fear in the sense of danger to himself, but the realization that her abilities could far exceed anything he could command or anticipate. He also understood why she remained so quiet, so unassuming. Flashpoint had learned that power often required invisibility. Recognition could be dangerous. Bragging could be fatal. Silence was not humility, it was strategy. Every word she chose to speak, every action she allowed others to witness, had been carefully measured against the risks of exposure. Briggs realized that her calm demeanor, her measured interactions, her subtle efficiency, they were all the result of years of operating in environments where one mistake could be fatal. By the time he closed the classified file, the hangar outside was quiet, the hum of engines and footsteps replaced by the stillness of night. Briggs sat back, absorbing the enormity of what he had learned. The laughter at her tattoo, the casual underestimation, the early assumptions, they were all gone, replaced by an intense awareness that he was in the presence of someone extraordinary. He had witnessed a glimpse of her capability firsthand, but the full depth of her skill and experience was now undeniable, etched clearly in black and white in the classified reports. Commander Briggs understood one thing with perfect clarity. Everything he thought he knew about this technician had been wrong. Flashpoint was not just a legend of the past. She was a living force, operating quietly, with precision and authority that exceeded anything he had ever encountered. And he had laughed at her tattoo. The realization was sobering, almost frightening. The quiet technician in his squadron was someone whose skill had altered the course of battle in a way few could comprehend. Yet she moved among them with a calm, unassuming grace, completely aware of the power she wielded, and completely in control of the narrative around her. Briggs knew, instinctively, that underestimating her again would be a mistake he could never afford. As he prepared to leave his office for the night, he glanced once more at the folder labeled Operation Flashpoint. He could still hear the faint hum of jets in the distance, could still see her silhouette moving through the hangar with silent authority. And he understood finally that his first impression, his laugh at the tattoo, had been his first, and possibly last, mistake. Tomorrow, everything would change. Flashpoint was no longer invisible. The next morning, the air at Naval Air Station buzzed with activity, sharper and more urgent than usual. Walked through the hangar, carrying her laptop case, reviewing the day's diagnostics silently. The hum of engines and the distant roar of jets filled the space, mingling with the chatter of pilots and technicians. Despite the apparent routine, his instincts were alert, honed over years of missions where seconds meant life or death. She had learned to read the subtle signs of impending failure, the minor flicker of a warning light, the unusual spike in system voltage, the way pilots, radios carried a faint static pulse before a communications fault. Commander Briggs, already unsettled from the previous night's discoveries, watched her closely. He had spent hours reviewing operation, understanding for the first time the scale of what Flashpoint had accomplished. Every instinct told him to pay attention, to observe, and, most importantly, not to underestimate her again. Yet nothing in the briefings or files could prepare him for the unpredictability of real-time events. Today would be the test. By mid-morning, the squadron received an urgent alert. A training jet in mid-flight had reported a simultaneous failure of its navigation system and communications array. The pilot, a promising young lieutenant, struggled to maintain course as alarms blared in the cockpit. The squadron's response teams sprang into action, but within seconds, it became clear that the situation was more serious than a routine malfunction. Panic rippled through the hangar. "Commander, we've got a live comms and nav failure on Echo 1. He's losing altitude," a technician shouted over the radio, his voice edged with fear. Briggs stiffened, realizing that his own expertise would be insufficient to stabilize the situation from the ground. He glanced at, who had already assessed the incoming telemetry with the calm precision that had come to define her. Her eyes scanned the readouts, fingers flying across her laptop keyboard as she cross-referenced multiple systems, her mind moving faster than anyone else could follow. His voice came over the comm link, calm but firm. "Lieutenant, maintain steady attitude. Reduce speed by 10 knots. I'm patching you through to stabilize nav override. Confirm thrusters engaged." The pilot, startled by the sudden authority in her tone, followed her instructions. Within seconds, the alarms decreased slightly. His fingers moved rapidly across multiple screens, initiating emergency protocols she had memorized for situations far worse than this one. She coordinated system overrides, rerouted redundant flight pathways, and preemptively countered signal interferences, all while monitoring the jet's vitals in real time. The hangar went silent. Technicians froze, eyes glued to its rapid movements. Pilots whispered to each other, incredulous at her efficiency. Commander Briggs felt a chill run down his spine. He had read about this in classified files. He had studied her feats on, but seeing it unfold in real time, controlling a live situation with dozens of lives at stake, was an entirely different experience. This was no rehearsal. This was her instinct in action, precise and lethal in its effectiveness. Minutes stretched like hours. Every second mattered. The jet's altitude fluctuated dangerously, and the radar displayed potential obstacles in its path. Recalibrated the navigational vectors, issuing split-second instructions to the pilot while compensating for signal interference from a nearby communications tower. "Adjust heading 20 degrees starboard, maintain altitude. I've got thruster correction engaged, now." The pilot obeyed, his voice trembling slightly, but her calm guidance kept panic at bay. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the jet stabilized. The alarm ceased, systems returned to nominal operation, and the pilot's breathing returned to normal. He reported back to with a shaky, grateful voice, "Flashpoint, thank you, I don't know how you did it." His lips curled into the smallest of smiles, almost imperceptible. She responded simply, "Just doing my job. Maintain focus on landing procedure." Then, as silently as she had intervened, she stepped back, her laptop already tucked under her arm, her demeanor calm as though nothing extraordinary had happened. The hangar erupted in murmurs and astonished whispers. Technicians exchanged glances, pilots muttered incredulously, and Briggs remained frozen in place, unable to tear his eyes from her. He had just witnessed a live demonstration of the skill, precision, and instinct he had only read about in classified files. Flashpoint wasn't just a legend on paper. She was the living embodiment of the history he had studied, operating quietly among them, almost invisible until the exact moment her intervention was required. Briggs approached her, his face a mixture of awe, relief, and an unspoken apology. I don't know what to say," he stammered, struggling to find words that could convey both his respect and his previous misjudgment. Looked up briefly, her gray eyes meeting his, calm and measured. "No need to say anything, Commander," she replied evenly. "Focus on the squadron. They're in good hands now." Her tone was firm but devoid of arrogance. She had no need to assert her dominance. Her actions had already done that. In the aftermath, the squadron slowly regained its rhythm, though the memory of the emergency lingered. Every pilot, every technician, every officer had observed the quiet intervention, the precise execution that had saved a life and a jet. And every observer now understood something they hadn't before. This was not just skill. This was instinct, experience compressed into action. A mind that had survived impossible situations and had emerged not just intact, but capable of bending chaos to its will. Briggs, still processing the event, returned to his office, replaying every movement, every command, every adjustment had made. The realization weighed heavily. She had operated far beyond the limits of what he had thought possible. He had underestimated her, and almost disastrously so. The laughter at her tattoo, the casual dismissals, the assumptions of inexperience, they were all gone, replaced by a growing awareness of the depth of her skill, her composure, and her hidden history. He remembered the call sign again, Flashpoint. It was more than a nickname. It was a warning, a symbol of capability so extraordinary that it demanded recognition, respect, and perhaps most importantly, silence until the moment it was needed. Had chosen that moment wisely. She had stepped in precisely when it mattered, saved lives, and returned to calm anonymity, leaving everyone else to process the enormity of what had just occurred. By the end of the day, word had spread across the squadron. The quiet technician was no longer simply another tech. She was Flashpoint, alive, active, and operating among them. Pilots exchanged stories of her intervention, technicians quietly acknowledged her presence, and even Commander Briggs, though still processing his shock, recognized an unspoken truth. Underestimating her was no longer an option. She had earned every ounce of respect in a matter of minutes, without a single word of boast or claim. As the sun dipped behind the hangar, casting long shadows over the rows of jets, returned to her workspace. Her demeanor was unchanged, calm, precise, almost unassuming, but there was a subtle confidence in her stride. The squadron had seen what she could do, and even Commander Briggs knew that this quiet technician carried a legacy far greater than most could imagine. She had intervened when it mattered most, controlled chaos with unmatched precision, and walked away as if nothing had happened. That was the mark of Flashpoint, the legend that lived in silence until the moment she chose to act. And tomorrow, Briggs knew, she would continue to teach them all the lesson he had learned today. Heroes are not always loud. Sometimes they are quiet, invisible, and deadly precise. And sometimes, the person you laugh at is the same person who saves your life without you ever realizing it. The hangar at Naval Air Station was quieter than usual the morning after the emergency scramble. The jets were parked neatly, engines off, and the lingering hum of yesterday's chaos had faded into a calm vigilance. Technicians and pilots moved through their routines, but the energy in the air had shifted. Whispers circulated. "Did you see what she did yesterday? That was incredible. Flashpoint, she's unreal." Moved through the space as if unaware of the reverence growing around her. Calm, precise, and composed, she checked her laptop, scanned diagnostics, and prepared for the day's flight exercises. Commander Briggs, standing near the briefing room doorway, had spent the night replaying the events in his mind. He couldn't shake the image of stabilizing the jet, issuing commands with exacting precision, and coordinating systems faster than anyone else could process. It wasn't just her technical skill. Anyone could memorize protocols. It was the instinct, the foresight, the ability to anticipate every potential failure before it happened. Her actions had saved lives, and for the first time, he felt a genuine, unshakable respect mixed with humility. By mid-morning, Briggs had made a decision. He called her to the briefing room for a private word. He began, his tone more formal than usual. "I need to acknowledge something. Yesterday, your actions, your intervention saved the lieutenant and the jet. And honestly, you've left me in awe. I misjudged you and I need to correct that." Ever calm nodded slightly, her gray eyes meeting his. "Thank you, Commander. I did what I had to do." Her voice was neutral, but her composure carried the weight of someone who had long ago learned that respect was earned through action, not words. Briggs leaned back slightly, studying her. "It's more than just skill, it's instinct, coordination, forethought. You've done things most officers wouldn't even dream of attempting." Gave a small, almost imperceptible smile. "Experience tends to do that," she said. She didn't elaborate, though the memory of hung just beneath the surface, invisible to anyone not cleared for classified missions. Briggs realized she wasn't boasting. She didn't need to. Her legend preceded her in ways subtle, yet impossible to ignore. Word of the incident quickly spread across the squadron. Technicians who had previously underestimated her now approached with quiet deference, asking questions and observing her methods with curiosity and awe. Pilots whispered her name among themselves, aware that the woman who had stabilized a jet mid-crisis was not to be taken lightly. Even senior officers, who had been skeptical of a quiet, unassuming tech, began to recognize that her influence would inevitably change the dynamics of the squadron. His presence alone carried authority. The shift wasn't just about fear or admiration, it was about confidence. Pilots now approached flight checks knowing that systems oversight meant that their jets were in capable hands. Technicians adjusted their own workflow to match her efficiency, seeking to learn from her methods. Her calm and precise approach created a ripple effect, elevating the squadron's overall performance. The quiet technician had become the benchmark, the standard by which others unconsciously measured themselves. Briggs watched all of this unfold, a mixture of pride and humility simmering beneath his uniform. He had seen her in action, read her file, and understood her past, but seeing how her presence alone reshaped the squadron dynamics was something else entirely. Respect, he realized, wasn't given, it was earned. And Flashpoint had earned it in a way that words alone could never convey. During a mid-morning briefing, Briggs addressed the squadron formally, making sure his tone was sincere. Yesterday, one of our own demonstrated skill, precision, and courage that saved a life and a jet. Technician, also known as Flashpoint, showed us the standard of excellence we should all strive to emulate. Her actions remind us that sometimes the quietest voice is the one with the most to teach. I want everyone here to understand that her experience and judgment are invaluable. Treat her accordingly. Listened quietly, expression neutral. She didn't need to react. The acknowledgement itself was enough. The squadron absorbed his words, the weight of the commander's formal recognition sinking in. Respect was no longer whispered or assumed. It had been confirmed, endorsed by the highest authority present, and yet remained humble, letting her actions continue to speak louder than any speech or commendation could. Throughout the day, moved between tasks seamlessly. She checked diagnostics, calibrated systems, and assisted pilots preparing for flights. Each action carried the subtle authority of someone who had faced extreme danger and survived, someone who had learned to operate in high-stakes environments with precision and calm. Pilots deferred to her guidance without hesitation. Technicians watched her methods with quiet fascination. And even Commander Briggs found himself observing her work with a mix of awe and contemplation. By afternoon, the story of her intervention had reached almost everyone in the squadron. Some joked nervously, still struggling to reconcile the quiet tech they had met days ago with the legend who had stabilized a jet mid-flight. Others were more measured, recognizing that her skill could no longer be doubted. Even new recruits who had never encountered her before approached with cautious curiosity, observing her demeanor, her focus, her precision, had become an unspoken standard of excellence. Briggs noticed something else. Her influence wasn't just technical, it was cultural. Her calm, focused approach encouraged others to emulate her, to operate more efficiently, more thoughtfully, and with greater awareness. Mistakes were corrected quietly, systems were maintained proactively, and the overall atmosphere shifted subtly but significantly. His presence had become a force multiplier, enhancing not just individual performance but the collective capability of the squadron. Later, as the sun dipped toward the horizon and the final flights returned, Briggs found himself alone within the hangar. He took a deep breath, the weight of the day pressing on him. "You've changed things here," he said quietly. "Not just yesterday, but in the way everyone operates. You've earned respect not just from me, but from the entire squadron," nodded, expression calm as ever. "I don't do it for recognition," she replied softly. "I do it because it matters, because lives depend on it. That's all that counts." Briggs watched her, understanding fully now what he had only glimpsed before. This wasn't just a technician, not just a legend of classified missions. Flashpoint was a catalyst. She transformed the environment simply by existing within it, by demonstrating excellence and calm authority under pressure. He had mocked her tattoo once. Now he understood its true meaning, a mark not of frivolity, but of experience, discipline, and readiness. As the hangar lights dimmed and the squadron prepared for the evening, moved quietly toward the exit. Pilots and technicians watched her pass, some nodding subtly, others whispering her name with newfound reverence. Briggs remained in the doorway, absorbing the shift that had taken place over the course of a single day. Flashpoint was more than a legend. She was an influence, a standard, and a reminder that skill and courage often manifest quietly, invisibly, until the moment the world demands them. And for the first time, Briggs realized that heroes were not always the loudest or the most visible. Sometimes, they were quiet, precise, and deadly competent, just like Flashpoint, The following week dawned crisp and clear at Naval Air Station. Jets lined the runway like disciplined sentinels, gleaming under the morning sun, engines idle but ready to roar. The squadron had regained its rhythm after the previous week's events, but the memory of intervention lingered in every mind. Technicians double-checked systems with heightened diligence, pilots prepared with greater precision, and even Commander Briggs moved with a cautious respect, acutely aware that the quiet technician had altered the balance of competence within the squadron. That morning, a secure alert interrupted the usual routine. The squadron's radar had detected an unauthorized aircraft approaching U.S. airspace at high speed, exhibiting erratic flight patterns and advanced electronic jamming capabilities. The threat was classified at the highest level, codenamed Operation Silver Talon, and all personnel were briefed on an immediate scramble protocol. Panic was suppressed, but tension surged. This was no ordinary exercise or training scenario. This was a potential international incident, and the responsibility weighed heavily on every officer present. Briggs convened the squadron in the briefing room where he outlined the gravity of the situation. "This is not a drill," he emphasized. "We're facing an advanced aircraft with unknown intent. Standard protocols may not be sufficient. I want the best minds and the most precise operators at the ready. That includes technician. You will coordinate electronic surveillance and countermeasures." Eyes, calm and alert, met his. She nodded once, unflinching. To her, the stakes were clear. This wasn't about recognition or fear. It was about preventing disaster. The squadron quickly mobilized. Jets roared down the runway as pilots took to the skis, radar and communications arrays scanning for the approaching threat. In the operations center was already immersed in her work, fingers dancing across multiple consoles as she monitored electronic signals, decrypted unknown frequencies, and coordinated live telemetry with airborne assets. Her eyes flicked rapidly between screens, calculating vectors, tracking anomalies, and predicting potential evasive maneuvers. It was instinct and training fused into action, the flashpoint way. As the rogue aircraft neared restricted airspace, it executed a sudden maneuver, disrupting communications and throwing off tracking systems. Pilots scrambled, attempting to regain visual and electronic contact, but the advanced jamming rendered conventional methods nearly useless. The squadron's tension rose with every heartbeat. Briggs leaned over his console, watching her operate with a speed and clarity that comprehension. "What's your assessment?" he asked, almost hesitantly. His fingers didn't pause. "The aircraft is equipped with adaptive signal jamming," she said, her voice steady. "I'm initiating countermeasures and routing guidance to intercepting jets. We need to anticipate evasive maneuvers at 0.2-second intervals. Pilot teams Delta and Echo follow the updated vectoring instructions. Maintain strict formation." Her commands were precise, almost surgical. Each movement of her hands, each line of code she entered, shifted the balance of control. The pilots followed her instructions meticulously, adjusting flight paths, stabilizing electronic warfare systems, and coordinating intercept patterns. The rogue aircraft reacted aggressively, attempting to breach defensive layers, but anticipated each move, recalibrating guidance and countermeasures in real time. Every split-second calculation she made prevented potential collisions, avoided breaches, and kept the pilots in control. Briggs, observing the operations center, felt his heart rate spike. He had read about such situations in classified reports, but seeing it unfold live, with lives and national security on the line, was an entirely different experience. Minutes stretched with agonizing intensity. The rogue aircraft executed unpredictable maneuvers, testing the limits of the pilot's training and the squadron's equipment. Remained unshaken, her focus absolute, her calm authority radiating through the operations center. She coordinated with the radar team, recalculated interception angles, and issued micro-adjustments to the flight paths. It was a high-stakes dance, where hesitation could mean disaster, and she led with silent mastery. Finally, with her guidance, the intercepting jets closed in. The rogue aircraft, confronted with precise positioning, advanced countermeasures, and coordinated pilot maneuvers, was forced to alter its trajectory. Communications were restored, and its systems were neutralized enough to allow controlled engagement. The pilot teams successfully escorted the intruder out of restricted airspace without incident, averting a potential catastrophe. The operation concluded within minutes, but the intensity left the squadron breathless. The aftermath in the hangar was electric. Pilots, technicians, and officers absorbed the enormity of what had just transpired. Her calm presence, her precise instructions, and her anticipatory problem-solving had transformed what could have been a disaster into a controlled, decisive operation. The legend of Flashpoint had grown, moving from classified whispers to undeniable reality in the eyes of everyone present. Briggs approached her, his face a mixture of awe, relief, and profound respect. "I can't even begin to express what just happened," he said, voice tense. "You've not only saved the squadron but potentially countless lives. Your timing, your calculations, everything was perfect. You are extraordinary," responded with quiet humility. "It's about the mission, Commander, about precision and anticipation. That's all that matters." Her tone was calm, almost matter-of-fact, but the weight of her experience carried through every word. Across the squadron, the perception of had shifted irrevocably. No longer merely a skilled technician, she was a leader in action, an unspoken authority whose decisions could determine life or death. Technicians observed her methods closely, pilots deferred to her instructions without question, and even Briggs realized that her influence extended beyond immediate crisis management. Calm, precise control had created a new standard for operational excellence, one that would resonate across the squadron for years to come. Yet for the mission was not about recognition. Her satisfaction came from precision, efficiency, and the knowledge that the right outcomes had been achieved. She moved quietly, coordinating post-mission diagnostics, ensuring that every jet and system was properly checked, every pilot accounted for, and every anomaly addressed. The crisis had passed, but the vigilance, the preparedness, and the discipline remained. As the sun set over, casting long shadows across the runway and hangar, Briggs reflected on the events. Flashpoint had proven herself once again. She had taken command of a situation that could have spiraled into disaster and had orchestrated a flawless outcome. Her past, her experience, and her instincts had converged perfectly with her present environment, and the results were undeniable. He had learned in the most profound way possible that appearances were deceptive and legends could walk quietly among them, unseen until the world demanded their intervention. By the evening, the story of his decisive role in Operation Silver Talon had spread through the squadron. Her legend was no longer confined to classified files or whispered conversations. It lived in the eyes of those who had witnessed her skill firsthand. Respect was universal, awe undeniable, and the squadron had learned an invaluable lesson. Heroes are not always visible, and sometimes the quietest presence carries the greatest impact. And as finally returned to her workspace, her expression calm, precise, and unassuming, Briggs knew one truth with certainty. Flashpoint was not just a name from the past. She was here in the present, and her influence would define the future of the squadron. The following morning, the squadron at Naval Air Station was alive with anticipation. The events of Operation Silver Talon had left everyone, pilots, technicians, and officers, acutely aware of the depth of his abilities. Her calm, precise guidance had not only averted a crisis, but had instilled a new standard of excellence across the entire squadron. Yet, for this was another day of work. She moved through the hangar methodically, checking systems, running diagnostics, and coordinating pre-flight preparations. Each action carried the quiet authority of someone who had seen and survived far more than anyone else could imagine. Commander Briggs, still processing the events of the past week, had called a special squadron briefing. The usual chatter was replaced by a tense anticipation as everyone gathered. Briggs stepped forward, his demeanor formal but edged with respect. "Squadron, Before today's exercises begin, I want to address something important. You've all witnessed the extraordinary skill and leadership of technician, Flashpoint. Her actions over the past week, particularly during Operation Silver Talon, have saved lives, preserved assets, and set a new standard for this unit. She has earned not only our respect but our trust. A hush fell over the room. Standing slightly apart, listened quietly, her expression neutral but calm. She didn't seek recognition. She never had. But the acknowledgement from Briggs resonated deeply. The squadron absorbed his words, understanding fully that Flashpoint was not just a title from classified files, but a living, breathing force whose presence demanded both respect and vigilance. Briggs continued, his voice firm. From this day forward, we'll have authority over all electronic and systems operations during active missions. She will advise on strategy, coordinate countermeasures, and serve as the primary consultant for any situation involving aircraft systems or electronic warfare. Her judgment is unparalleled, and I expect everyone to follow her guidance without hesitation. Underestimating her is no longer an option. The pilots and technicians exchanged glances, some nodding subtly, others openly acknowledging the truth in Briggs' words. His presence had already transformed the culture of the squadron. This formal recognition cemented it. Respect was no longer merely given, it was institutionalized. Flashpoint's influence would now define the standard operating procedures, expectations, and performance metrics of the entire unit. As the day progressed, demonstrated her skills in a series of rigorous exercises. Each scenario, from simulated system failures to complex electronic jamming, tested the squadron's limits. Coordinated with split-second precision, guiding pilots through emergencies, predicting equipment malfunctions, and stabilizing simulated crises before they could escalate. Her calm demeanor inspired confidence. Her rapid problem-solving instilled trust, and her quiet authority transformed every challenge into a learning opportunity for the squadron. During one particularly complex exercise, a simulated mid-air navigation failure caused several jets to lose alignment simultaneously. Panic began to ripple through the team but intervened instantly. Lieutenant Gray, stabilize altitude. Echo 2, follow Delta's vector. I've recalibrated the override system. Apply thruster correction now. Her instructions were precise, her timing perfect. Within moments, every jet regained stability and the exercise continued without incident. Pilots and technicians alike were awestruck. His ability to anticipate failures and orchestrate solutions in real time was nothing short of legendary. By afternoon, the squadron's respect for her had transformed into near reverence. Even the most skeptical officers acknowledged her mastery of both systems and people. Had become more than a technician, she was a mentor, a strategist, and a living example of what precision, experience, and composure could achieve. Her influence extended beyond technical expertise. She had reshaped the very mindset of the squadron, instilling confidence, discipline, and resilience. Commander Briggs, observing the proceedings, reflected on the journey. From the first moment he had mocked her tattoo to witnessing her stabilize a rogue aircraft, every misconception had been overturned. Was no longer a quiet technician. She was Flashpoint, the legend who had shaped classified operations, saved countless lives, and now redefined the standards of excellence for an entire squadron. Briggs understood that her story was a reminder of the power of quiet competence, of experience tempered by precision, and of leadership earned through action rather than words. Later, in a moment of quiet reflection, Briggs approached privately. He said, his tone softer than usual, I've spent the past week watching you, analyzing what you've done and understanding your history. I underestimated you, and I want to acknowledge that. You've not only saved lives and assets but transformed this squadron. Your legacy, it's undeniable. His gaze met his, calm and unwavering. Thank you, Commander, she replied simply. It's never about recognition. It's about doing what's necessary, protecting lives, and ensuring missions succeed. That's all that matters. Her words were measured, yet they carried the weight of experience, responsibility, and humility. By evening, word of her accomplishments had spread beyond the squadron. Other units, officers, and support teams had begun to take note of the technician who had repeatedly demonstrated exceptional skill under pressure. Her legend, once confined to classified files and whispered stories, was now recognized openly, respected universally, and embraced willingly. Flashpoint had become a symbol, a living example of courage, skill, and calm authority. As the sun set, casting long shadows over the runway and hangar, stood quietly, observing the squadron. Jets lined the tarmac, pilots preparing for exercises, technicians double-checking systems, all moving with a renewed sense of purpose and confidence. Her presence had instilled discipline, competence, and respect. Her influence would continue to shape the unit long after the day ended. Commander Briggs, standing nearby, understood the full scope of what had occurred. He had witnessed a transformation, not only in the squadron but in the perception of what leadership, skill, and experience could achieve. Had proven that heroes were not always visible, that quiet competence could reshape entire operations, and that true influence often stemmed from action, not recognition. The day concluded with a formal debriefing, where the squadron collectively acknowledged contributions. Her guidance, foresight, and calm authority had become the standard by which all future operations would be measured. And while she remained modest, quietly executing her duties, her presence had left an indelible mark on every member of the squadron. Flashpoint was no longer a legend in files. She was a living, breathing force whose legacy was now intertwined with the very identity of the unit. As night fell, the hangar lights dimmed and the last jets were secured, walked alone through the quiet hangar. Her expression remained calm, precise, and unassuming, but the weight of her actions, the lives she had influenced, and the respect she had earned radiated silently from her. She was Flashpoint, the technician who had become a legend, whose presence had reshaped an entire squadron, and whose legacy would endure long after she left the airfield. And for Commander Briggs, who had once laughed at her tattoo, the lesson was clear. Heroes are often invisible until the world demands their intervention, and when they act, they leave a mark that no words can adequately describe.